Hello, and we are back for the second session of the day. The next session is Enhancing Project Delivery Through Pre-Project Investment. This next session will focus on a CDAO-led and commissioned research study, the impacts of pre-project investment and quality of documents on project delivery efficiencies. This study was completed with the Ryerson Institute for Infrastructure Innovation with a focus to understand the root causes of significant schedule delays and cost escalations during project delivery. The study sought input from the entire industry, including owners, architects, engineers, contractors, subcontractors, interior designers, and reference projects from across the country. The results provide an objective framework for a change in the project delivery policies for public infrastructure. Our panelists today will discuss the findings and key recommendations coming out of this report, along with what this may mean to the future of the Canadian design and construction industry. Now, this session will have a live poll component, meaning the panelists are going to be asking viewers and attendees to participate in a poll. To the right of your screen, and included within your chat box, you'll see a poll section. If you click on that poll at the time the polls are live, you can actually participate and vote live online. And then as we close the polls, you'll find them and be able to go back and forth between what is a current poll and a closed poll through that tab. So just to give everyone a heads up around that. And now your panelists for this session. I'd love to introduce Sandra Burnell, who is the principal of Rivet and Associates Limited. She has more than 35 years of experience in the construction industry. And in 2006, she joined Rivet and Associates Limited, where she is now, has now become proficient in the preparation of claims and while successfully testifying on behalf of her clients in the courts. She's also participated in numerous successful mediations, has sat on various construction-related committees, and spoken at a number of industry events. She's also a registered architect and has completed both the Bachelor of Environmental Science and Architecture and a Bachelor of Architecture from University of Waterloo. Giovanni Cotolo is the president of the Ontario General Contractors Association, also known as the OGCA. His focus is on health and safety, equitable contract language provisions, the expansion of innovation and technology in construction, and investments in ICI infrastructure projects of all sizes in Ontario. Before joining the OGCA in 2020, Giovanni served as the executive managing director of the Residential Framing Contractors Association, the RFCA, for about 8 years, and then also as executive director of the Ontario Sewer and Water Main Construction Association, also known as OSWCA, for 6 years. All the acronyms around this table, I love it. Christy Doyle is the executive director of the Ontario Association of Architects, also known as the OAA. She served with the OAA for almost 3 decades. She was appointed in 2011 as the executive director and leads a staff of 36 and is responsible for oversight of daily management and operation of the association, including allocation of both financial and human resources. She supports the OAA Council in strategic decision-making, as well as policy analysis and development. Prior to the pandemic, she led the association through the renovation of its headquarters at 111 Moatfield Drive in Toronto, which included a deep energy retrofit and interior renew and refresh designed to reach net zero carbon. And Bruce Matthews is the executive director of the Association of Consulting Engineering Companies of Ontario. Bruce is a graduate of System Design Engineering at the University of Waterloo. After finishing his undergraduate degree, Bruce worked as an engineer designing control and display interfaces for complex operational environments in aerospace, defense, and nuclear power systems. Prior to joining ACEC, he worked for a number of other regulatory bodies, including Professional Engineers of Ontario, the Real Estate Council of Ontario, the College and Association of Registered Nurses of Alberta, and the Ontario College of Trades. And so now handing this over to the panel. Thank you, everyone.
Have we got our presentation? Sorry.
Not seeing it yet.
Not seeing it yet. Give me a second.
Please stand by. We're experiencing technical difficulties.
Here we go. The impacts of the pre-project investment and quality on documents on project delivery efficiencies. This is a study that was released in March of 2022. Carrying on from our earlier discussions, which I thought were absolutely fabulous, there's a lot of very valuable lessons that can be learned. Interestingly enough, this particular study didn't even begin to imagine the things that we were going to encounter when the different effects of the pandemic and the world situation today have encountered that we've been encountering. So what I'd like to do is we'll start with Bruce. Bruce, can you tell us about your involvement in the CDAO? We've had a little bit this morning earlier about what the CDAO is, but what's your involvement? When did it start? What was it about? Who are the members? And what have you accomplished so far?
Excellent. Well, for myself, given that I've been in this current role for going on 5 years, I have been engaged with CDAO during that 5-year period, but largely as a participant in the forum meetings, which is the regular meeting of the senior staff of all the constituent associations. But specific to this presentation and this research report, I was the chair of the steering committee pretty much since its inception back in April 2018, working with Christy and Giovanni and a few others to guide the overall direction of the study and liaising with the researchers at Ryerson, or what is now Toronto Metropolitan University. As you know, Sharon did provide a bit of an overview of CDAO at the start of the day. I'll do just a quick recap for those who may have joined the platform here a little bit later. CDAO was established in June of 2010 as a forum for discussion and development of and advocacy for the broader construction and design industry's issues related to provincial government policy, legislation, and regulation. The CDAO's primary goal is to provide municipal and provincial governments with a collaborative forum to seek input and advice from stakeholders whose collective vision is to ensure that Ontario is a province of livable, marketable, sustainable communities, and to ensure that Ontario is a province known for its leading-edge infrastructure and built environment projects. I think, as Sharon mentioned, CDAO currently made up of 19 constituent organizations that cover the full spectrum of the design and construction industry. That includes architects, engineers, planners and interior designers, through to general contractors, road builders, sewer and water main contractors, residential and heavy construction, and also the surety industry. CDAO has taken what has been a sort of highly fragmented approach to industry advocacy and created a single voice with which to speak to government on higher levels of issues of policy and regulation. CDAO develops consensus opinions and recommendations, which are generally supported by appropriate research, such as what we'll be talking about today, and presents those to government. In its early days, CDAO was focused on procurement and had an annual procurement day like we're doing here today for many years. But also since then, it's established more formal liaisons with some of the larger public sector clients, such as Infrastructure Ontario and Metrolinx, that have enabled direct dialogue. As for recent accomplishments, at the outset of the pandemic, CDAO and its member associations acted quite quickly to support the push to have the design and construction sectors designated as essential services to keep key projects on track and to keep people employed. And then more recently, CDAO has commenced research on the impacts of the recent changes to the Construction Act, especially as it relates to prompt payment, adjudication, holdback, and liens. And then also looking at RFP procurement best practices. And you can look for the outputs on those efforts being released soon.
Excellent. Thank you, Bruce. Okay, Christy, how about telling us about the study? How did it come about? Who initiated it, funded it? How can somebody access the study?
Okay, thank you so much, Sandra. And good morning, everybody. I'm happy to be here with you today. Before I jump into that, I wanted to just set a little bit more context, if I could, as well, just to, I know Sandra or Sharon read our bios, and I'm really happy that I've been able to be immersed in the design and construction industry for, almost the last 30 years. For clarity, I am not an architect. My background is in public policy and administration, but the OAA is a founding partner of the design and construction industry. And so throughout part of my role at the OAA, I've been fortunate to work closely with many of you actually who are on this call today, as well as my colleagues, Bruce and Giovanni, and their respective stakeholder organizations. So just a bit of a backdrop for a really long and collaborative relationship that we've had. So to answer those questions, Sandra, how did this study initiate? This idea for this research study, I would say, began in and around 2017. And it was a result of an opportunity that arose to partner with then Ryerson and their PhD department. And that was brought forward to the members of the CDAO by one of our founding members, namely the OGCA. And in particular, I would be remiss if I didn't mention it was through our then president, Clive Thurston of the OGCA. So prior to that, and I'm sure certainly not news to anyone here on the call, there has been ongoing discussions for many, many years about things like project cost overruns, delays, the quality of design documentation, drawings and construction documents, and also, unfortunately, a lot of finger pointing going on for many, many years. So when this opportunity presented itself, it seemed like an excellent way to uncover data and reasoning behind those issues that we've all been talking about for many, many years. So not surprisingly, when the proposal was received, it was done so with quite a bit of excitement on the part of the CDAO member organizations, and it really wasn't a hard sell for us to jump into that. I think Giovanni might be talking a little bit more about the funding, but we sourced a MyTax grant through Ryerson and also some matching funds. But what was really important to recognize is that this project is and was a real collaborative effort by so many various and widespread industry partners, as well as some client groups. So I want to jump to the question about why. And again, I think, as I said, this was a really, really easy sell individually for individual organizations, but also collectively as the CDAO. Since the inception, one of the main objectives of the CDAO was to be a resource for government, for client groups, in terms of the industry and in particular around procurement issues. So the notion of this research project just supported very directly the CDAO's strategic objectives. So, and while, many of us were engaged throughout the years, as well as CDAO engaged with government and other client groups about these issues, we always lacked this empirical data to support our ideas and the arguments and to develop solutions around the challenges that are being faced, which I mentioned earlier. So that's really, I think, the quick Coles Notes history of the study. In terms of the study itself, for those, I'm hoping that some of you have already had a chance to look at it and read it. If you haven't, it is available on the CDAO website. So if you haven't had a chance to look at it, please do go to the CDAO website. It's there. And just for clarification too, the report itself is actually two pieces. We, as the CDAO, created an executive summary. There was so much data, so much information that we wanted to create an executive summary that helped those that were reading it really get to the salient points, but also speak to the core issues that we were trying to get at. So the first 12 pages or so is an executive summary, and then the remainder of the study is comprised within the documents. And I know as well that most of, if not all of our 19 organizations that are part of the CDAO have posted that document to their website. So it's another resource that you can get through the industry associations. But again, the main spot is on the CDAO website. I'll leave it back to you, Sandra.
Excellent, Christy. Now we've heard a little bit from our design industry. How about hearing from the construction industry, Giovanni? Tell us about the undertaking of the study. What did it take? How long did it take? everybody that was involved, what was it like getting everybody involved?
Well, I think we should start off by saying that there will be a quiz on the study. So I hope that everyone in attendance has actually read the study, because all these poll questions, we're actually going to quiz you on this one, and you may fail. Anyway, with that being said, there was I get both, Bruce and Christy alluded to it. There was a lot of discussion about how the study began just through conversations. This has all been about CDOs focus on procurement and on the betterment of the industry when you look at it. And CDO speaking as one voice assists those outside of the construction and design sphere to comprehend that we're actually truly an interdependent and collaborative industry, and who are always looking to make things better. I think that should be kind of like the premise behind why the undertaking occurred. And then, as Christy alluded to, there were discussions dating back years. This is something that wasn't just one idea, but a series of ideas that was bred from these discussion points within CDAO. And then we had basically what seemed like an endless supply of anecdotal examples about the issues we were all individually facing concerning the overall quality of documents. But we noted that there was no one comprehensive study to demonstrate the correlations. So that prompted like a further external discussion with academic bodies, as we'll touch upon in a second. But until we finally opted to engage with the Ryerson Institute for Infrastructure and Innovation, or I believe what's called now the Metropolitan University, and I believe they've transferred their name. But the study included an initial literature review of all existing studies and documents that were related to the subject matter, and which was able to demonstrate that the hypothesis connecting the money spent in the pre-design phase would directly and exponentially translate into the pre-construction and then construction phases. To then fully capture quantifiable information, the CDO and Ryerson, as it was called at the time, embarked on developing and then conducting an online surveys with a series of questions geared directly to the participants. And those participants included, as touched upon, owners, architects and engineers, general contractors and subcontractors. So basically all stakeholders involved in the construction phases. So pursuant to the survey results, Ryerson finally conducted in-person interviews. So it wasn't just the literature review, then it dealt with the actual interactions with human beings and their intake on projects. And understand that the scope of the study was nationwide through the online survey, which was then distributed in both English and French. And it was a noted feature that 4 different and yet congruent sets of questions were sent out, again, to each one of the stakeholder groups. So you asked who paid for this study. Well, various organizations and associations, including obviously the complete CDAO group that have vested interest in procurement. We always had Metaxas, which is Mathematics of Information Technology and Complex Systems, which is a government organization that provides funding and whatnot. The CDAO, OGCA, the Architects Association of Consulting Engineer Companies of Ontario, the National Trade Contractors Council of Canada, the Canadian Construction Associations, Grand Valley Construction Associations, and Rivet and Associates Limited. So you can see that there was, in essence, a collaboration from all aspects of the construction. It wasn't just geared to one segment of it, because we wanted the study to be fulsome. As noted, the study was prepared by Ryerson Institute for Infrastructure and Innovation at the time, and they were the research body who were the academics, basically moving things forward. But obviously, everything was done in conjunction with the CDAO and all of our member firms. So the participation was, again, when you look at it, all aspects of it, but the main components of the study, as you see through the responses in the study, we had involvement on construction projects specifically in Ontario, but drawing on experiences nationally as well. Designers and architects and engineers participated to provide their experiences and perspectives on the pre-construction phases. And then you had general contractors and subcontractors participated and provided their hands-on experiences with the actual project itself. And then we had owners provide their overall perspective on the I guess the satisfaction of the overall project and what they perceived as how the project went. So each stakeholder provided a very nuanced view of their role in the construction project. The project itself was released to buyers of construction, specifically buyers in Ontario on the public side, but this was also released nationally through our partner associations like the CCA, the Canadian Construction Association, and the National Trade Council of Contractors. Anyway, the study was issued electronically, simply because for ease of use instead of a printed form, which makes it very, very easy. I see that Saskia has posted it in the chat if anyone wants to download it or get a direct connection to it. Or if anyone wants, they can reach out to any one of the partner associations with the CDAO in order to obtain a copy of it. And I think the last question that you had listed, Sandra, were expectations met? So in short answer would be yes, expectations were met. And the study now provides us with objective and quantitative data to work from. But this study should be viewed as a baseline, a starting point. And that we should also have subsequent studies in the same vein in order to observe if the industry is progressing or worsening. So I hope that kind of gives you perspective. I'll pass it back to you, Sandra.
Fabulous. One of the things that I was rather honored to work with my esteemed colleagues on this study, and just the fact that the opportunity to bring together designers, owners, contractors to discuss very real issues that are faced in the industry, and issues which often put all the parties against one another. So to see everybody work with this integrated approach, which Helen was emphasizing so much earlier, I think that there's many things that are key, and we'll get into that a bit further as we discuss. But as Giovanni broke the ice and said, we're now going to have a test, we have our first poll question here. And were you familiar? The question we're asking here, if you go to the polls on the right, you can click your answer, yes or no. Were you familiar with this study prior to today's introduction?
It's going to come back 100% yes.
So good news. I'm not sure if everybody's seeing the results that I'm seeing here, but there are some people that were familiar with the study. We're looking at 26%. So it's nice to know that some, but the objective is that we want to make sure that we have everybody familiar with this, because I think it includes some very crucial information for us to move forward with.
Sandra, there's some people answering in the actual chat. If you could go to where it says polls and hit that little poll button and then answer there.
Yeah, answer under the polls on the right-hand side. I think we're good. We're 28%. We have familiar with the study, which is great. Okay, we'll move to the next question. Of those that were familiar with the study, did you participate? Do we have any of the participants in the audience?
Aside from the panel, you mean?
That's a good possibility that the participants are the panel, Giovanni.
Giovanni, you're not supposed to be answering the polls.
What? I'm not supposed to voice my opinion? Okay, sorry about that.
The interesting thing about the participation, you think this would be something that everybody would just be jumping up and wanting to be a part of. And it wasn't as easy as we thought it might be from the outset. And certainly we were pleased that we were able to get data from all participants across the country. And that was really important. And we'll discuss a little bit more about that. So the group here, we don't have many participants, but we're really hoping that we will get more participants in our future studies as this moves forward. So
the good news there, Sandra, I'm just going to interrupt there briefly, is we did have 440 some odd valid responses that contributed to the data from which the conclusions were drawn. So I think from that context, we were quite successful. And as Giovanni mentioned, getting that from across the country as well, so that we have a good distribution base for that data. It was very encouraging.
Very encouraging. So our next poll question, moving on, is have you encountered increased project costs as a result of unplanned changes or extended durations?
Ooh, wow.
Wow, this one's easy.
Yeah, this one's easy. This one's
Now,
easy,
the interesting
100%.
thing, of course, is these increased project costs. This study was prepared prior to encountering all of the difficulties that people have encountered during the pandemic. And so we can just imagine now we're at 150% in the answers on this one. So it's very crucial that we are looking at this and that we are planning and developing pre-planning and contingency plans. One of the things that I've noticed in projects over the years is also understanding the importance of the timing. We can't all of a sudden start making structural changes to our design when we're in the middle because we have a supply issue. It has to be thought about and pre-planned up front. So 100% we have in this category. Somehow I'm not surprised.
Yeah, not shocked at all.
Not shocked at all. So Bruce, can you talk about the key takeaways from the study?
Sure, thanks, Sandra. Well, to begin, the study did confirm sort of the nature and extent of the problem per se. And thanks, you've got this figure here that shows about 2/3 of our respondents saying that there has been a negative trend with respect to the quality of documents and the resultant impacts on project delivery. But more importantly, the study confirmed the important role that the owner's investment in that upfront pre-planning or pre-project planning and design have. So if you go to the next slide and looking at figure 15, and I'm not going to go through all the figures here, obviously there are 75 some in the report as you go through it, but this is an example, the respondents to the survey believing that it's an owner's actions that in that pre-planning stage that are ultimately key to efficient and timely project delivery. So, the most significant findings from the study are first, that the owners and stakeholders should spend more time and more effort to ensure that they adequately scope the project before going to market. Specifically, the clarity, completeness, and accuracy of the initial information that are provided in a request for proposal is found to have a strong positive correlation with the extent of budget change or during the or other scope change in the design phase, and that's further going to influence the success of bidding and schedule delays and cost overruns during construction. But the other finding is that there's a need for commitment on the part of owners to allow the time and budget for design reviews, checks, and verifications to be undertaken throughout each phase of the design process. And fundamentally, I'd paraphrase this is, we need to stop being so hell-bent for leather about getting shovels into the ground and start construction when frankly, we're not ready. Appreciate the optics that relate to making progress and visually see that the public money is being spent in a certain way, and construction activity is very important in terms of that appearance, but rushing to construction is clearly counterproductive as demonstrated within this study. The result of the pre-planning investment by the owners is going to be significantly improved document quality, which itself will result in significantly improved project delivery. Again, quoting directly from the report, the survey confirmed that design document quality issues are actually rooted in issues of inadequate time provided, inadequate fees, inadequate information about existing conditions, and these issues frequently result in schedule delays, cost increases during actual project delivery or execution. The literature review, which Giovanni made a quick reference to, part of that formed the research here, showed that a change that would cost $100 to address during pre-planning would probably cost about $1,000 to address during the design phase, and then $10,000 during construction. And I think it's probably fair to extrapolate that further and suggest to address whatever you want to address from that change, call it a problem, call it whatever, but you're probably looking at $100,000 if you're trying to do it during the operation maintenance phase for the particular asset that we're talking about. So Therefore, early discovery for that need for change is essential for project delivery efficiency. Overall, the study demonstrates that significant opportunities exist for better collaboration and communication among owners and designers and general contractors and subcontractors, which itself will improve design document quality and construction productivity. And then lastly, the survey results provide all the project stakeholders with a very solid basis for future discussion about positive change and about exacting value in project delivery for both public and private construction projects here in Canada.
Excellent, Bruce. I would say that these recommendations are more prevalent now than ever. And Christy, can you give us some insight into the designers aspect?
Sure. Thanks, Sandra. And I, notwithstanding what Bruce has just run through, the takeaways, I mean, they're obvious. And so I know we keep using the word collaboration, and from the design community, from our perspective, I would use a couple of words to articulate what this means. And I think it really means, collaboration, validation, and awareness. And all of that means a way forward. So one of the very important aspects of this study for the design community is that it does demonstrate that there's this support from the rest of the industry team, but also a desire to find some solutions. Again, we've been talking about these issues for many, many years. We just didn't have data. And when we embarked on this study as a collective group, we are moving forward, again, communicating as a collective group with the intent of improving the procurement process for a better end result. I think at the end of the day, everybody, all of our industry associations, the procurement folks, the clients, we all want to design and build a good, sustainable environment in the most effective and efficient way. So our end objectives are similar. So this is all about educating each other. It's about improving communication. And so I'm going to go back and just talk briefly about what I mentioned earlier about, it's human nature, finger pointing. We've been doing that unfortunately for a long time. And it's through, I have to say that through our respective organizations and through things like collaborations like the CDAO, we've actually, the design community in many regards have in fact felt long supported in a variety of different ways and in discussions. And it includes everything from advancing better procurement policies and procedures, including the use of quality-based selection, appropriate and fair pay for the designer, whether that's the architect, the engineer, the landscape architect, the interior designer, the licensed technologist, and really that an appropriate fee is necessary to ensure that the appropriate time and resources can be allocated and again, it contribute to a better end result. So that's the first thing I just want to mention. This study really helps to signal a commitment to this ongoing collaboration and the support that we need. I'm going to use the word validate. I think this study validates that what we've been suggesting individually and collectively for many, many years, that there is a direct correlation between quality and completeness of drawings and the pre-planning time and money invested at the outset of the project. We're very aware of that. We're very aware of the conversations around the quality of documents. So designers and our respective organizations, we've continued to convey the importance of that schedule, budget, fair professional fees to allow for the critical elements such as design review, checks and balances, verifications, et cetera, et cetera. This study for us helps validate those arguments. I think, again, I know we keep reiterating this, we keep saying that the study has validated and confirmed that the design document issues are often rooted in inadequate time provided, inadequate fees, inadequate attention to pre-planning, which includes inadequate information about existing conditions. So the other thing I want to, the last piece of this is about awareness and a way forward. So studies and surveys are probably one of the best ways to test a hypothesis, but the outcome will often creates that just better awareness and understanding of how others view your role and contribution to the project. And, you know, it's almost like a bit of a self-reflection. So there's some things I think in the study that's helping all of the industry partners do some reflecting. So, and we're hoping that our procurement colleagues that are on this meeting and within the call today will also create some awareness within those and for all of the players that are involved. So I think once, again, I encourage you to make sure you have a chance to review the study if you haven't already, and that we, once you do have a chance to review it, we hope that you'll appreciate what each of the industry players believes or perceives to be the issues and the costs, or the cause and root of cost overruns and schedule delays. So if we can use this data to move yardsticks within the industry, within the government, within public procurement, I think it will mean a great deal to the design community to address the issues that are being raised, the concerns that are being raised, and the challenges that we face around planning or budgets or fees. And then the designers can respond better to projects where we have the benefit of adequate, you know, planning, fees, budgets. And then we can better focus on what needs to be done, and so that we're not working within those restraints that sometimes that lack of upfront investment causes. So I know we're repeating a lot of points, but I think it's really important to say a few of these things again. So even recognizing that scope changes are inevitable, better pre-planning will help reduce the frequency and also build in time to deal with those changes should they occur. So again, I know I'll suggest the design community is acutely aware of this ongoing debate about design documents, and this study again provides that support to understand the correlation between the pre-planning and upfront investment. And again, it's not about finger pointing, it's about creating a better understanding that brings all of the stakeholders onto the same page regarding the importance and value of, we're hoping, and highlight the necessity for that owner commitment to invest in the project upfront. So I think what I'll just wrap up by saying that for us, for the design community, if changes are made, it will just speak to better working relations within the projects, a better product at the end of the day. We talked about the correlation between the exponential cost growth over the course of a project where that investment is not made up front. So, at the end of the day, more complete drawings will hopefully mean less scope changes, fewer coordination issues, and less rework due to that lack of clarity and information up front.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Christy. Now, Giovanni, your turn. How about the impact to the construction industry? What does this mean to contractors, and how has the construction industry reacted?
So I guess in a word, it provides clarity. It's pretty simple. Can you advance the slide just one? I want to show this the next, there it is. Okay, perfect. So here, if you look at figure 22, it demonstrates how the process works and how the deterioration ultimately is dealt with in the pre-construction or construction phases. I want to kind of reiterate what Bruce touched upon. When the research demonstrates that an error that costs $100 to address during the pre-design, and that could ultimately cost $1,000 to address during the design phase, and then ultimately cost $10,000 during the commencement of construction, that is a 100-fold increase. And I think it bears repeating when it comes down to it. It clearly demonstrates the importance of solving the issue at the earliest point in the chain as possible. Passing the buck down the line simply compounds the issue as well as the costs. I think what the study demonstrates, and what we at CDAO have talked about at length or at nausea, depending upon how you want to look at it, is the interdependency of construction. And I want to kind of impress upon the buyers of construction who are in the audience today, that includes you. Just because think about it, you're the ultimate end user of the product. And I'm going to use a term, garbage in, you get garbage out. So if you start with a haphazard system at the beginning, you throw it together, and then you expect a diamond at the end, that's an incongruency. So therefore, the early discovery of errors or preventing those errors are essential for the project cost efficiency. For general contractors, we'll assess the risk equated with a project and quantify that level of exposure to that risk. And if the risk is more manageable and evident, with all of the information being provided up front and whatnot, then the parameters for pricing will also be easier to manage. And I think that's something that procurement as a whole needs to understand. At no point in time are we as an industry trying to point fingers at each other, but the responsibility of the risk should be borne by the party that should best able to assess that risk and absorb that risk. So by not providing the designers and the architects and the engineers on the upfront, and yet still expecting a diamond at the end, is incongruent. And that's something that I think the study demonstrates the industry knows about clearly, because you know what, when we did the poll, it's, you know, how many of you had cost overruns? 100% of you have. So I think, again, if you haven't read the study, you need to. It's quite self-evident, but it's also kind of an approach to realizing that our interdependency with one another. So the next question I think that Sandra asked was, how has the construction industry reacted? Interesting enough, the study simply quantified what most of the stakeholders already understood and that have communicated. And I think from the buyer's standpoint, you've heard frustrations, and you've heard in the previous presentation about supply chain issues and whatnot. I think you have to absorb all of that when looking at procurement and look at it as a holistic process as opposed to just component parts. Fixing the issues in the early pre-design phase is the most logical way to ensure that projects are then geared for success. Think about it. It's analogous to the example of building a structure. You need to ensure that the project starts with the proper footings and foundations to ensure that every layer that is added to it is properly attributed. So if you don't start with everything being level and plumb, and properly built, then each subsequent level will be crooked. And again, I go back to the thing. If you commence in a haphazard fashion, your entire project will suffer, and the errors are compounded as each layer is added, but clearly as this study demonstrates. Sandra, I pass it back to you.
Excellent. And along with that, Giovanni, the importance of the upfront planning is understanding and knowing and projecting what the risks are with the project as you move forward. It was mentioned in the earlier session about contingency planning. The procurement offices need to be prepared for the things that we haven't even imagined could happen, let alone the things that are very common things that continue to happen, or the new things that we are encountering. So through the communication with all the parties involved up front, it's going to bring us that much closer to a successful project. And of course, from my experience where I'm coming from, you talk about the cost of the project. The minute we hit delay, the costs go well beyond the numbers that you and Bruce were just talking about, because the costs are just enormous that can be encountered by the parties, and we need to address the risks up front in that. So next, Bruce, we'd like to bring you forward again and talk about getting the message out. Now we know, what are we going to do? What's CDAO going to do?
Excellent. Thanks, Sandra. I'm actually going to pick up on pieces of what Giovanni just mentioned and yourself, because we've advertised this procurement day as about how to manage and mitigate risk. And indeed, this issue we're talking about is really one of risk management and risk mitigation. And all the power and the control in relation to that lies ultimately with decisions made by project owners with respect to their plans and timing and so on. And so I think we need to obviously keep that front of mind. However, this particular study, of course, it is as noted earlier, it's fundamentally an academic research paper. Yes, the executive summary has been nicely crafted to be digestible by people within the industry, but once you're digging into the main report. It's going to very clearly read a little dryly, a little bit as being from an academic reason or as an academic source, but that was actually necessary for the purposes of rigor and validity and faith in the results. This isn't meant to be a compilation of just anecdotal opinions. This is meant to be some substantive, defendable piece of research. So that part's important. So we've got that as our starting point. But if you look at the overall project plan that was in place when this study started, it did call for a final phase of action after the research is published. CDAO is still working on some of the details for that element, but it could include a number of different things, including the creation and publication of either one or more white papers that might more succinctly inform government policy development efforts in this area. The research could also be used as an input to the development of a decision support tool for use by project owners in determining what is that proper level of upfront investment and planning to achieve the best project delivery efficiency. No one here is talking about eliminating risk. I think that's absolute fantasy. There's a sort of this inverse exponential thing you get. The more risk you try and mitigate and minimize, the higher the costs are related. So you find that right balance, but there should be something in place that help make those decisions about how far along and how much information sufficiently mitigates the risk on a given project, based on complexity and a whole bunch of other things before moving forward. And then lastly, CDAO may put together either a future conference or symposium of some kind that would be a means of outreach on this subject, sort of taking that next step and further disseminating and building on the particular research findings. So, ultimately, the research report, I would say, is a conversation starter. And the CDAO is going to be using its network of associations to ensure that the report does end up in the hands of the appropriate owner groups and owner representatives who are in the best position to act on those recommendations. And I think really it's going to be a nice anchoring point for the construction and design sector for many years with respect to this discussion. So I think that's where we see things going.
Wonderful, thank you. Christy, carrying on from what Bruce has been saying, as a starter, how can these results assist the CDAO communicate with the various groups, owners, government organizations, politicians? And also what we as industry participants, what can we do to help?
I think, Bruce actually did a great job just summarizing that. I think he hit the salient points on what's next and how this is an anchor document. It's a foundational piece. It's the start of a conversation. So I would just support, what Bruce said about, the CDAO is going to continue to use this in our conversations and to communicate and to support the discussions that we're having around procurement. So in a big picture sense, I think this is, again, just one piece of perhaps many to come. And I know that one of the questions I'm actually going to kind of preempt, because I know there's a question in the chat just about, well, that's great. We actually all want this, but there's a political side to this. And so I think we all as industry, within the industry or industry representatives or organizations, that's a challenge that we have in terms of understanding when you're looking at it from a monetary perspective, that it's like, okay, why do we need to spend this much here? And I'll go back to what Giovanni said about that exponential growth. And if you don't spend the dollar here, you're going to spend 10 over here. So I think maybe one of the things that we can do too as a group is to look at that piece of it, to actually dig a little bit deeper into the evidence of why it actually is going to cost you more at the end of the day. So we do that. We experience that. We talk to clients about, doing sustainable elements within your projects, and they have this thought that it's okay, you're spending too much up front, but really we've got to continue to tell that story about why it's actually going to cost you more in the end and why this is actually more effective and efficient. So I just wanted to reiterate that. I think our industry groups, it's a great tool for us individually as groups to have discussions. It's useful for our own memberships. I encourage, again, any owners and clients that are on this call and or their representatives, please take it back, read it, think about it. It's being presented with the best intentions in regards to improving the design, the procurement of design and construction in this province, and most importantly, delivering the highest quality infrastructure for Ontarians. So again, I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. I think at the end of the day, you're right. We all want the same thing. So we want everyone to recognize that it's a collaboration within the industry. We're all on the same page on this. I think it's an exciting springboard to build on and support each other in our efforts to do the best job. And we always say if the project team's on the same page, it helps to make the owner, or helps the owner to make good decisions. So yeah, I think that's, we still got a lot of work to do.
Okay, that's very good. Giovanni, next we're moving over to you to wrap up this part of the presentation. So what benefits can we expect, and when, if we get the additional funding and time commitments? And then also, considering the current challenges facing the construction industry, how might the provision of additional funding and time impact the outcome of project in today's climate?
So I think everyone here has been talking about, clarity, because it assists the contractors, subcontractors, and suppliers. But I do believe that this can be viewed holistically. And if you heard Christy and Bruce talking, we are looking at this holistically. So let's start with the owners, because they're the ones in attendance. So let's go to, the figure. Thank you very much for that. Figure 23 from the survey demonstrates the results of pre-planning investment by the owners deliver significant improved design document quality, which itself will result in significantly improved project delivery efficiencies. Think about it. Clarity of documents also eliminates the potential for future disputes due to the downloading of responsibility along the responsibility chain, and ultimately onto the contractor and or whatever the case, holding certain assumptions as to who is responsible for a certain aspect of the work. Therefore, the owner gets the project turned over to them in a faster degree of certainty because everyone has clarity throughout the process. We're also looking at it, from the architect, engineer, and design professionals. They're being given the time and the money required to deliver a well thought out end product and not rushed or shortchanged. This increases their level of satisfaction and interaction and benefits the final product. Again, we don't have to reiterate time and again, but it's a 100-fold increase if you fix things on the front end as opposed to the back end. And I've noted that for contractors and subcontractors, the removal of potential issues is massive. Think about it. We can look at it through different aspects. You can turn this over into possibly an IPD, an integrated project delivery design, where everyone is at the table and there's risk being shared. There's different models out there, and I know that the majority of public buyers like the lump sum because it allows for cost certainty and whatnot. But in today's day and age, you have to look at the variables, and from the presentation this morning, we have some supply chain issues. There's another number of things happening. So I guess I can go into the current challenges facing the construction industry, but I think we always go back to clarity is always the key, and everyone knows what is expected, and the potential surprises are kept to a minimum. Not having to guess about what the owner has envisioned, or because something is lacking, and lacking that information gives contractors uncertainty, and that's how they price things. But giving them and providing that information up front gives contractors peace of mind and allows for the holistic view of what the project will be. Ultimately, this leads to better overall relationships with all of the parties involved because it ceases that whole finger pointing aspect that Christy alluded to. The construction and design community are symbiotically linked, and hence we all need to look at how to eliminate issues before they are created. This study demonstrates that significant opportunities exist for better collaboration and communication among owners, designers, general contractors, and subcontractors, which will ultimately and simply improve the design document quality and construction productivity. I think that more time and money spent on the front end is actually more economical since that is the area that yields the largest benefits on a dollar-to-dollar basis. As the study demonstrates, at the pre-design phase, $1 is equivalent to $1, as opposed to the construction phase, where the same dollar allocation is now $100. So again, fix it where it's the least impactful on the price point, but the most impactful to the overall project. So having the foresight for procurement, especially with the current supply chain issues, and as all the presenters in the previous presentation noted, that these problems are not going away, this will provide for a project that can be more accurately forecast and budget. And knowing all components along the process will provide for a better timing and a final product that everyone can be proud of.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Giovanni. I see that we've got quite a number of questions here, but and we are running out of time. But I would like to, before we get into that, look at our last two poll questions, because we are saying the importance of having an interactive environment here. And the question now is, do you think studies like this one would further benefit the construction industry?
Yeah,
and so I'm thrilled to see the response to this is 100%. Looking at some of the questions earlier, yes, the Engineers Association, the engineer designers were involved in this study. The study had involved all the aspects, all the various parties that are involved in the construction industry. And also the fact that a question about whether the owners, they often aren't aware of these problems. This is why this collaborative environment is so important. I was so excited when I first came across the CDAO, because I looked at it as an opportunity where all the voices can come together and make sure that the parties know the risks that the other parties are facing so that we can develop plans together. So the last question that I have here then, before we go to the general questions, as Giovanni said, we've got a test here. Would you participate in any further studies that may branch out from this one?
They're just afraid of failing, you know that, right? Oh, we have one outlier. I love it.
Someone says no. It did take effort for those that participated, because we were looking for data to support projects. And one of the things that we were saying is very important is for individuals to keep data on their own projects so they know how they stand within their own projects. They can keep data in the format that we developed for this study. And I think the next steps going further with the CDAO is to develop steps for owners so they can track their own data and have the ammunition they need when they're talking to their politicians, their environment, their group, and knowing their risks. So we've got, well, I think we're essentially at the end of our time. I'm not sure, panelists, if there's any specific questions you feel. There's quite a few here. I think the most important thing is we take all these questions back so that they are being addressed in the future.
Yep. Sandra, I'm just going to pipe in on one of them that deals with this concept of who's responsible ultimately for educating the owners with respect to these issues. And I think this is where this goes directly back to the whole issues of risk management, risk mitigation.
Yes.
That lack of awareness, and you'll often see a matrix when people who are studying risk management talk about it, and there's the things you know, and there's the things that you know them. And then there's things that you don't know, but you're aware of the fact that you don't know them, and there's information either you can't achieve or you just haven't gathered. The big risk factor, of course, is the stuff that you don't know and you aren't even aware that you don't know it, right? That there's something out there impacting a process that you just had even no mental construct of to even know that it's an issue to be thinking about. And I think this study, frankly, helps maybe fill in some of that kind of a gap or provides information in that sort of a category. But I would say it's part of the collaboration process that the results speak to that will help inform and educate owners as well as the other stakeholders in the process with respect to these issues.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's critical. And the other thing from the owner's perspective is oftentimes owners aren't actively involved in design or in construction. So they don't necessarily understand or appreciate how some of their actions can impact a project. It seems simple. I see a drawing. Can't you just change a wall? But when materials have been ordered, things are happening. Many things are already in action. Value engineering, I speak about it often, that value engineering can have a detrimental impact on a project if that value engineering isn't done prior to construction, because all of a sudden somebody says, I'm over budget, I need to save money. I worked on a project where after a project's been tendered, they decided to cut off the entire 2 top floors so they could bring the budget down. And when they topped off the 2 top floors, nothing was coordinated. So the decisions and understanding the impact of the decisions, and I put forward to CDAO, is in that go forward plan, definitely emphasize the education so individuals understand that entire process and how they fit in or who they need to bring in early to ask the kind of questions that can help them plan, assess the risk, and develop the contingencies that they need to deal with those risks.
Sandra, I'd like
Sharon,
sorry, I'd like
go
to
ahead. I'm just going to find out how we are on time,
okay.
Sharon. Have we lost Sharon?
Can you hear me, Sandra?
Yeah.
I think we should try to wrap up. So you may want to, if you want to address one more question, and then we'll wrap up for a quick break before the next session.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for this opportunity. Giovanni, we'll let you close up.
Thank you very much. I just want to touch upon one of the questions that was asked is, what is the best way to communicate the long-term savings and efficiencies in a world focused on short-term profits and political terms? Use the study. Give them this study because it demonstrates what the industry is saying, and it also includes owners. The long-term gains, again, this is taxpayer dollars that we're talking about. So if you have $1 that you can spend early on the project and it is equivalent to $1, that is a monumental savings, when that same dollar on the long-term side of things will be $100. It's a 100-fold increase. I think that if you utilize a study and you provide it to them, or if the municipality, for whatever reason doesn't want to listen to that, talk to the CDAO. We're happy to make presentations about this. We're happy to talk to the buyers of construction in order to educate them. I think that the more we talk about this, the better we are at solving the problem. It's no one is just pointing at any one part of the chain. We're all involved in this, and we're all trying to better the situation. So the study is just a starting point. It's a discussion piece. It's something that can be utilized to bring attention to politicians, especially if procurement and engineering departments within municipalities are having issues with them, in order to quantify what your beliefs currently are. So I don't want to take up too much time because we can go on and on and on, but we're happy to answer these questions during the break.
Yes, and thank you, panelists. It's very important. The questions that have been asked are very good questions, and they will be taken into consideration as the CDAO moves their plans forward. Thank you, panelists.
Thank you for the opportunity. It was great.
Thanks all.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for that great presentation. And as Sandra said, the panelists are around on the show floor. I know that this is kind of sort of quite a bit of conversation and questions. Feel free to find a CDAO member, anyone from the panel on the show floor. We're now going to take a quick break until 11:30. So we've got about 10 minutes until the next session. And hopefully we'll see you on the floor and engage in some great conversation with you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.